4, 3, 2, 1. We are live, episode 6 of Made in the 80s. I'm Jay Boy, the graded 80s kid, here with your favorite Nardini from the 80s, sealed VHS, Thomas Nardini, the king. There he is. Rocking
Hello. No, so I still can't. Are you saying my real last name, or are you doing your thing that you think is funny and saying Nardini?
You'll never know.
It's subtle.
I'm so good. Yeah, I'm so good. You'll just never know. I totally have you there. I know. You're going to just be playing that back. You're like, wait, what? What?
No, I hear it. I can hear it. He's saying it. He's saying
swear
it.
to God, he's being an ass.
Yeah.
So, happy Christmas month to you, my friend.
Happy Christmas, Harry. Happy Christmas.
As we were allowed to say in the 80s. Merry Christmas. Happy Christmas. Oh, yeah. Merry Christmas.
I think you can still say it now. You're just a bigot. That's all.
Right. Happy holidays to you and yours. And to Kwanzaa. Have a happy Kwanzaa. Hey, I love holidays that they invented in the 70s. You know? Like, it's like, fuck it. We're just going to make this modern shit up. Like, Kwanzaa, we feel left out. Let's make it up.
Scientology. Yeah.
Yep. It's great. Scientology.
All the good stuff. Hey, it works for Tom Cruise. Who are we to fucking say anything?
So, some big news this week to cover, obviously. We have big news in the music world, on both sides, the collectible music world. Also, big news on the Metallica front. I don't know if you tuned into that yet, if you guys out there did. But yeah, I mean... huge news for you and I, obviously, right? Let's start with the big announcement of the week. If you guys out there listening to us are not familiar, kind of the history of video game collectibles that turned into VHS collectibles that then turned into whatever else is next. So maybe the 2-minute synopsis is, I started buying sealed video games around 2002.
That's a shot. That's a shot. You mentioned sealed video games 2002.
Yeah.
I'm turning this into a drinking game, by the way. I've been really thinking about this.
Okay. Yeah. That would bring
some of my
friends in.
If we mention how we were actors, that's another shot.
Yeah.
If I tell a dad story, that's a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else?
Man, I don't know. I fuck up the audio or video. That's a shot.
Everyone's drunk by the 5 minutes in at that point. Yeah, for sure. 2002 video games. There were no another shot. There were no companies grading video games. Obviously, at that point, grading really hadn't become a big thing. I mean, grading cars became a thing. Probably like the earliest I remember it is maybe mid 90s.
I don't think it wasn't that early. No, this is past.
There was PSA was. Oh, God, I mean, I'm not a sports card guy. I'm sure some guys out there could really get this, but I feel like I remember PSA stuff in the late 90s.
I don't think so. At a minimum, I was still into cards then, and that hadn't been done. The way it goes, to my knowledge, is comics came first and then cards. But cards really, whether the genesis was in the late 90s of card grading, which I don't think it was, or the early 2000s, it really took off, if I remember right, sort of mid 2000s, somewhere in there. And then that dude I worked with that he started the Beckett grading service. I think he said they saw what PSA was doing, like, oh shit, there's a lot of money to be made here. Or he brought that to them. They were like, I don't know, it could just be a gimmick. And he's like, no, there's something here. So they're like, all right, fine, if you want to do it, you can figure it out and set it up. Anyway, long story short, I think he said he started at 2009 for Beckett grading services.
I know for a fact that there was grading in the mid to maybe early 2000s, because there were some cards that I looked for, like my story of passing on that Tom Brady PSA 10 shot, my playoff contenders one, idiot, passed on it for 10 grand, but that was some years later. I remember looking at them raw, certainly, so maybe I could be mistaken there. But the other thing is, I'm not a comics guy either. So maybe comics were first. I do remember graded comics in the 90s. I feel like that was a thing, but I'm not a comics guy. So maybe it was.
Holy shit. We're both wrong.
Okay.
The first ever PSA It was just like a prototype, but 1991, 92.
Yeah, I was thinking 90s. I remember seeing them. I thought it was mid to late 90s, but yeah, I remember graded cards in the 90s. I don't know about.
I just don't think it was like, I don't think it had really taken off yet. I think people were still on the fence about it.
Yeah,
because I was there. We did those sports card shows. I actually don't remember graded stuff, but to be fair, in Wisconsin, that's a shot. We're behind the times, so people there would have been like, you can't take it out of the case and hold it. No, that's not gonna work. What is this? One of them Bitcoins?
You can't take it out of the case and hold. I mean, that goes across the board. Isn't it funny how as each graded collectible comes along, there's the resistance of the old school collectors no matter what? Like I remember that in the 2000s with video games and then the next thing or whatever. But I'm because I did collect sports cards in the late 80s, early 90s and into the mid 90s a little bit. And I thought I remembered graded cards as a thing in the mid 90s. Comic books, I have no idea. That to me is completely. Now, I do remember there was another grading service that was pretty big for a while that kind of disappeared. I don't remember the name, but we'd have to get Michigan Sports Cards or one of our other buddies on here to kind of talk about that. But the sports card stuff and get some comic people. I'm sure you could look it up, but I don't remember.
I got one for it. CGC founded around 2000.
Okay, yeah.
So
that makes sense.
Everything I said about 5 minutes ago in my memory was 100% wrong.
Right. Well,
sounds about right.
A lot of bong residue and whatever.
I never was that guy.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. How dare you?
Yeah, I know you weren't.
You're the one that looks like the goddamn hippie right now. The fucking snowboarder.
I got my Burton hat on. Actually, I have this on for point later. But okay, so
what was it? We'll get to it later, but it's backwards, so I can't read.
East-west.
Oh, very cool.
So, don't remember graded video games. So I did remember graded sports cards in the 90s. No idea about comics. I remember when I discovered that a company, VGA, was doing video games grading in 2009, 10 in that area. And I submitted some of the stuff that I had been holding. I went through a few moves and sold off a lot of stuff, but that's when I remember that. And then, of course, they were actually founded on the idea of the guy that Tom Derby that founded that company. I believe this is the history of it. He was a big action figure guy. They started with Action Figure Authority, I believe. And then that became, they kind of branched off into other things, video games being one of them. And then, there was a very slow growth in video games from that time, 2009, 10, 11, 12, up until WATA was founded, I believe, in 2017. And then certainly they created their relationship with Heritage.
What a run they've had in such a short time. Holy
so short. I mean, think about that. That just shows you, if you get your ducks in a row, line up the proper relationships especially in a collect, but in anything, you line up the proper relationships, you know how to market it. They got exposure on television, they got exposure on YouTube, and they were able to put together quite a run. And then certainly the pandemic and the madness that happened from that certainly helped them, join it. Because if you look at the comps, like on Heritage for video games, it's just crazy. If you go 2000, you see it, the dates 2019 or even 2020, the prices are whatever, reasonable. Same thing that they were maybe, a year or two prior. And then anything that's after that is 10x, 20x.
Certainly, yeah. Also, two things. That's a shot. You mentioned an auction, but also new record. You made it 8 minutes, 59 seconds without mentioning an auction or Heritage.
Wow.
Pretty good.
Keep track.
We're getting better.
And you have to expand on that for me, brother. Changed everything, Mandela effect. Yeah, the Large Hadron Collider. Okay. So obviously WATA coming along really expedited the process there. VGA to me as a video game guy was always, they from what I've heard that they got involved in the early stages of this, when the early stages of the internet were there, and it was a lot of trolling. And, if you put anything out there, it was a lot of people that were just looking to cause fights and cause problems. So they kind of, went behind the curtain at that point and, kind of kept everything to themselves. And that's what I kind of like about the company, is that they, people have been, I saw once they put that post up for announcement, there were a lot of people complaining about turnaround times. I do know that they're in the process of moving to a much larger location, and they've been hiring people. I think they plan to, obviously, to try to expedite a lot of these things, and obviously this new division and things that they're going to be doing, which we'll talk about in a minute. But that's there was action figures became video games, became, then that turned into WADA and on down the line. Obviously since I already touched on it, we might as well talk about it. Their big announcement this week was that they are going to start grading all home media collectibles of some sort. I mean, they teased it. I don't know exactly everything that they're going to do, but obviously you saw in that picture, you had laser disc, VHS, cassettes, 8 tracks, vinyl, CDs. I'm sure you could throw DVDs in that mix, a lot of the same things. I mean, certainly there was a starting point off of that anyway, when you had, PS1 games in jewel cases and, certain things. There were some, crossover stuff. And certainly it seems like they're going to create a new division. Yes, I did see there was a laser disc in the picture. I imagine that's in the mix. If they're going to create a new division, potentially, I guess, maybe move VHS over into that.
I mean, one way or another, they'll get it figured out. And I saw some of those comments too of people like, oh, the turnaround times, blah, blah, blah. Like, I hate to be that guy and almost sound corporate speak, but for them, that's a good problem to have. That means you are an industry standard. People trust you, and they're coming to you to grade their shit and have it authenticated, because the turnaround on that, to me, VGA is like the PSA of graded cards, right? There's a million card companies that do grading, or grading services that grade cards, I should say. And if you look at the charts, PSA routinely brings 5 to 15% more value. Yeah. So I believe that VGA is the same thing. I
mean, value-wise, it got hurt because of Heritage's relationship with WADA as they came out. But I do think that the standard is there, and that goes back to what we were talking about as I kind of got off track, was kind of that man behind the curtain, not to, where a lot of these companies now are getting a lot bigger social media presence, whether it's, WADA or PSA or Heritage or whatever. They probably have somebody running that for them now in every one of those companies. I'm sure VGA will eventually join that club in some capacity.
We've talked about, you got to have that. You have to know this. You have to have a dedicated social media strategy and someone running that. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you do. But that, that's worked for them up to this point. Obviously, what the rollout of all this stuff will look like. But I mean, this is a huge, obviously for you and I, who have been, trying to create foresight for ourselves and see what was the next thing. And for me, video games are probably the most nostalgic. Now, I think, and you know this, we're good buddies. I did collect a lot of sports things in the 90s. I was a kid that was, enthralled, fascinated, constantly playing every sport I could at many different levels and everything else. Speaking of which, Nick Bollettieri died today. Shout out to that. One of the greatest tennis coaches in the history of the world. Taught Andre Agassi and Monica Seles, amongst many, many others in Florida. But being surrounded and like playing sports all the time, as I got a bit older, I wanted to kind of have an escapism from that. Not that I was like tired of it or anything, but I certainly didn't want to be playing sports all the time and watching sports and whatever, and then also collecting them. Now, I know there are guys who do that, played different sports at a high level and still collect stuff. But for me, I really enjoyed kind of the escapism of video games my whole life. A long day of practice or this, or playing with your friends all day outside and you come in and you smash an hour of Super Mario or something. That was just an awesome end to the day in the 80s and early 90s. So that's what I really attach to collecting. So the nostalgia factor for me is still always the strongest with video games.
I thought about that too yesterday, actually, randomly, how I was trying to compare, like, obviously video games lead the way for, between sealed VHS, cassettes, whatever, right? Video games are the king, and they're going to be. It's already been established for 10 plus years. And I was thinking, okay, so if they all started grading 10 years ago, video games, cassettes, VHS, etc., who would be winning right now? And I still think it would be video games, because you have that, like, you watched movies, you listen to music, but like you just said, particularly in our age range, once it was available and normal to have a video game system like in your home, in your room, you didn't have to go to arcade. That was like your special escape from the world. Like, it really was. And at the end of the day, I've said this to you a million times, anything we collect for the most part in this genre, and if you sell it, you're just selling people's emotions back to them. Is all it is. You're selling memories and emotions. And I think so many of our generation, like so many men before him, Walter Sobchak, have those just fond memories of your own little world, like playing in your room on that shit fucking TV and blowing in the cartridges and whatever. Like, that was the first time we had to problem solve at a young age and figure things out.
Yeah, and go over to a friend's house. To me, there are so many memories attached to every video game in my collection, that, like, of my top ones, my top 20 or 50 or whatever. I can tell you that I can almost remember buying it. I can almost remember everything about playing it the first time. It takes me back to whatever emotion or whatever was going on in my life at that time. I have that very strong connection. I think, there's another reason too for it. So I've gotten into, just like a lot of these other guys, collecting other stuff at the time too. Like, I've told you the reasons why I didn't get heavily into sports or sports card things, but like comic books were never a big thing for me other than Ninja Turtles. But I think action figures are really cool. They're very nostalgic to me. Like G.I. Joe is one that's very strong. Masters of the Universe, another one. I've been able to collect a few of my absolute favorites that I have really strong memory to. I've collected some of my favorite RC cars. Now that doesn't have as big of an audience, obviously, but those are really nostalgic for me. But it kind of, the action figures are very much tied to your youth, very young youth. The RC cars were very much my early teens. That's the first time you built something and made something and, whatever. So that stuff is all kind of tied together. But video games really go from childhood to teenage to adult, and it spans everything, and they have lineage. And I think the other thing that helps too is, like, for action figures, I do like, I have one here. I like the boxes. There's no doubt the boxes are great. I remember these this is G.I. Joe. This was probably the one that I remember the most, the Viper. I don't know why. It's just
I had Viper too for whatever.
But I really love this guy. And so, but the thing too,
that's the dude with like the full silver face mask, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
So, but I don't have as much of a memory of those, like, on the shelf, because normally what'd you do as an 80s kid? You tore through Toys R Us, you grab some shit. Oh my God. Now, maybe if you couldn't buy it that day, you really looked at it and were waiting for the next day or whatever. But you stole it. Okay. And then you took it home and opened it up and the package went. Now, some of those cards, like the cards on the G.I. Joes, are super cool. I remember keeping these and looking at all the other characters and what I wanted to,
which ones you wanted. Like, right. I want that guy. Or that guy's fucking stupid. Who the hell would buy that? The fridge? Get the fuck out of here.
But think about, like, going into KB Toys or Toys R Us or whatever, and the video games were back. So, that's ingrained in my brain, like looking at them on the shelf behind the counter, like mesmerized. And then,
that Grey Goose, that Belvedere vodka shelf, that was the top shelf shit for kids.
Yeah. And then, can I look at it? The plastic shimmering on it. I think that's what really connects with the video games, is the sealed portion of it, from seeing it from a distance on the shelf and like all the magic that's behind that, So even like, I have some action figure stuff that I bought out of the package because I actually liked the feeling and of having the ones that I had, right? And like, oh wow, like I have the Ewok Village, I have Castle Grayskull, I had the Road Ripper with He-Man with the battle armor. I like clicking his chest and seeing it go. Like, those actually are
you saying you like holding it in your hand?
I do. Yeah, it sounds like Wisconsin thing, doesn't it?
Yeah, you betcha.
Wait, I can't take it out of the package?
Oh, that's hogwash. That doesn't make any sense.
So
pay more to not hold it?
Yeah, I can't open it. Why would I want to do that?
Ah.
So I think that's where the nostalgia hits really hard because of video games. And my point in saying all this, the point of this conversation is the only thing that I've found that hits close to the level of video games for me personally, and that's why I've believed in this so strongly over buying it for the last couple of years, is sealed music stuff. Okay. Sealed music stuff stretches over a large portion of our lifetime. Youth, teenage, adulthood. Obviously, things like 8-tracks, like my memory goes back to 8-track. My dad had an 8-track player in an early car that we had, and I remember we had the one that I played over and over and over again was Fleetwood Mac Rumors. Just one of the all-time greatest albums in the history of music. And we had Sha Na Na and a few other ones in there. And then, of course, that was very early childhood for me. And then eventually most of our cars had tape decks and whatever. And then eventually into the 90s CDs and whatnot. But you have these different stages of nostalgia that connect in your lifetime the same way video games do with, like, you know, different carts. Then it went from carts to discs and this and that. So it's like the same concept with music. I love VHS, don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot of nostalgia tied to it, but I think it's very era specific. And I think the other thing is people really want to collect something that they that's era specific, right? Like time period specific, correct. So it's like, okay, I know we saw Wizard of Oz pop up recently on VHS. Awesome, great piece, but not from that time, not from the time of VHS, right? So to me, the connection isn't quite as strong, just like it wouldn't be in music. You know, if you pick up a Beatles CD or a Beatles cassette, cool. Some of them very rare, the earlier releases of that stuff on those, but that's not era specific or correct either. That's why I still think, like, you know, cassettes that were originally released in the cassette era will lead the way. CDs that were released in the CD era will lead the way. But the nostalgia is just other level because you have kind of that same concept, you know, like where you would look at the music or see it on the shelves. Most of it was sealed. Obviously, for those of us that grew up remembering the long box era of CDs, you know, it kind of, and long boxes, I think, have that same kind of feel as early video games. The cardboard box, some hollow spaces inside, so much harder to maintain condition.
Way more hollow space on the long boxes.
I mean, long boxes in mint condition are near impossible. They're near impossible because more than half the box is completely hollow.
It's air, yeah.
Yeah. For people that don't know, the reason that they did that was twofold. One was so that was the same size as the LP albums that were they were already set up so you could put 2 by 2 next to each other on a shelf. So a lot of these music stores didn't have to redo their shelving. Okay. And then also to deter against theft, I guess, at the beginning. I mean, even cassettes were made in long box at the beginning. Some of them, a lot of them. Or stores created long box holders for cassettes on their own. I saw a few pop up recently that had like old department store names that fit in the shelving. But the other thing too is, man, you put that shit in the car and you busted it open. If you had a cassette player in the car, that thing got open immediately on the way home, right? Yep. CD, same thing of that era. So the availability of these items. Now, I don't want to say for sure about anything because we saw with what happened with some VHS stuff where you're like, oh, I haven't seen one of these in 6 months. And then all of a sudden they just started popping out of woodwork. Big Lebowski, perfect example. You know, of one that we remember when they were like $10,000.
I do. I think one there. Yeah. 7 was the highest I ever saw.
Yeah. We were like, and it was the only one up for like 4 months. And we were like,
should we do it?
Buy it?
You want to go have these? I gotta have it.
It's our favorite movie.
Thank God we didn't, but Jesus.
Oh my God. Well, yeah. See, if we would have bought that one and the Halloween, we would have broke even. Well, we would have split the difference.
That should be a shot too. Anytime we made a horrible decision in our lives that fucked us over financially.
10 minutes in the show. And fuck it, bro. Who cares? Do whatever you want.
Apple was never going to be successful.
You gotta listen to this guy. You gotta hear this guy. That guy's hilarious. This is my guy. Hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
So, while I believe the VHS is great, I think that there's a lot more lineage too when you talk about bands and history. Just like I think, why is video games going to hold up? Because you have, 25 years from now, they're still going to be making Mario. There's still going to be people that want to go back and play these old games. And people can, like, that's what I've said now. We're in the period where there's some recycling, speculators are dropping out. You're going to need the next group because you go to a card show now, there's very few people that grew up watching in any way, shape, or form Roberto Clemente or Sandy Koufax or whatever, right? Okay, so you have very few people that are collecting those. You have their sons or their grandsons or people that are historians of the sport or the nostalgia of baseball in general. I think you're going to have to wait till you get to the next portion of that kind of collecting for video games where, 20, 25 years from now, I think you'll see the next level. I think you'll see progress from there, especially the rare stuff, which you already see.
Of everything we've mentioned, video games is that one that is multi-generational.
Yeah.
Music
is my
music.
Point.
That's why I was going to get to that. And then compared to VHS. But so Mario, we all love Mario. We literally grew up with the genesis of Mario, no pun intended. And then kids today, being born today, like they're going to know who Mario is. They're going to play the games. They're going to love it, and so on and so forth. Whereas, like Caddyshack, as much as I love it, are kids today watching Caddyshack?
Right.
They should be, but no. So it doesn't go on, or the small number of kids that do. So stuff like that. But then you get to music, like Zeppelin was cool back then. Zeppelin was cool in the 80s. Zeppelin's cool now.
Right.
So it along the lines of the trading cards and the comics and video games, it's already multi-generational. So it already has that leg up on VHS.
Yes. And while I think that there will be movies that endure, and I think things like horror will endure always, right? For VHS. Yeah, there's a music rock and roll Hall of Fame. I'm in Cleveland. Here we are. There's a little shout out, little plug for it. But, there's probably a movie Hall of Fame or Actors Hall of Fame. It doesn't have the same lineage and connection that music does. Certainly, if there's a big comeback, obviously, I think VHS in general is profiting and being helped from the nostalgia of the 80s comeback right now that is so strong. So you are seeing a lot of people, but eventually that'll wear off. To me, I was saying the other day, like, if you remember when we were in high school, the 60s were super popular. There were a few girls that were like all hit super 60s hippied out always and whatever. And like then the 70s kind of became a thing, even though there wasn't that big of a difference between the 60s and 70s. And then Dazed and Confused came out and whatever. And so, but that kind of went hand in hand for me. So I feel like we're in that era now where the 80s are super hot, super cool. Every time I go out, I'm amazed. This weekend I went out and there's like 10 dudes who look straight out of the 80s. I love it, dude. It's amazing. And
collars popped or what?
Oh, like every look you can think of. It's not just one 80s look, you have like, you just have them all, dude. It's so funny. You got the mullet guy, you got the long hair rocker guy, you got the mustache clean, like not clean cut, but you know what I mean, with maybe like the high top fade thing. And I've seen dudes with jean jackets and 80s rock t-shirts, and dude, it's everywhere. It's so funny to me. But they're obviously, that's helping this. 70s are like the 70s came a little later. I feel like the 90s are starting to come again. Not again, but they're starting to hit
all over the place.
Yeah, the 90s are hitting,
especially
now.
Out here in LA. There's just every chick is wearing like a platform, just terrible fucking shoes, whether they're Doc Martens or sandals or whatever, and then the wide leg jeans, and then the bare midriff and a tight little top.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, I didn't like that look in the 90s. I don't like it now.
There's a lot of shit about the 90s that sucks, bro. Like, just sucked. We've talked about this before. I don't think there hasn't been, in the last 20 years, there's not a defining pop cultural significance of anything other than like iPhones, social justice, LGBTQ and superhero movies and whatever. It's all a bunch of like, there's no defining music, right? Like that really connects with the youth. That's the key, is like connecting with the youth. Like, so I can tell you what the 50s were about, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. I don't know, what were they really about?
Emo.
No, I mean, that's not strong. None of that is strong enough.
How dare you?
The 2010s, no. The 2010s, what was the 2010s about? What are we about now? I mean, you know why? Because everyone is so consumed with consuming shit off their phone. They're not creating. They're not creating. They're not creating anything.
Dude, mark this time now, and you got to go back and watch. Just like,
why?
They're not creating. I was concerned.
Call to arms. You're gonna.
Oh, Lord. No, the 80s are the best.
Dude, they're not creating anything that's defining the generation in any way. And I thought, okay, there's times in the last 50 years where there's like a period where everything kind of lulls, and then some youth takes over with some movement that's very, very pop cultural defining, not just like. And it's, I think it's a lot of it is because the phones, and that's why there's so much more interest in things from the past, because it's so easily accessible to see all that stuff and to get into that stuff. And then also too, dude, think about this from the 80s. Like, I have a bunch of friends now who are like 19, 25, 30. I'm 44 fucking years old, dude. When I was 20, a 44-year-old was like, he might as well have been fucking dead, right? Like, my girlfriend's 27. Like, this dude, the shit just is not, there's not as big of a difference between ages anymore either. And that's because there's less defining differences between the generations in general right now. There's no defining characteristics to their generations. And so it goes back to like, okay, eventually the 80s, 90s nostalgia stuff is going to die down somewhat. Now you'll have a whole new group of collectors who got into it at this period of time rather than 30 years ago, and they'll still have some connection to it. But you're also going to have, that's why I think music, especially if you're getting a lot of these people into, in essence, rock and roll or metal or whatever that's popular right now because of 80s nostalgia, like hopefully there'll be a bunch of young dudes that put down their phones and pick up guitars, right? And so there'd be another generation of rock music or popular youth revolutionary music in some direction, you know, and a lot of it is mixed now. You know, you have country mixed with rap, or rock mixed with rap, or country rock type feeling or whatever, but something that's more defining. But that can carry then all that music through generationally, I think, and much more nostalgically linked together. The way you see with video games. That's my opinion of why I think, for multiple reasons, I think music can be significantly larger than VHS.
Okay.
That's it, and I'm sticking to it. What do you, I mean, your thoughts on the whole thing? I mean, what were your first thoughts on what is going to be their new division, HMA, Home Media Authority?
I think it's about time somebody did it, and somebody did it right is the key. Assuming everything goes properly, I'm sure it will. Like I said, to me, they're the gold standard of grading companies, certainly for video games, action figures, all that kind of stuff. So if you were to ask me, just of all the companies, who do you want to do this? I would have said VGA in a heartbeat.
100%.
And then, you know, with me, aesthetics are really important. So the case has to look good. The fonts have to look good. Everything has to be a pretty design to frame, you know, whatever you're putting in there, whether it's a VHS tape or a cassette or CD or whatever.
Yeah.
When the design is tacky, to me, it doubles down and ruins the look completely.
Well, that's a good point. You know, that's what I've always loved about VGA, is that it looks almost like a museum piece with its simplicity, right? You get the one circle that gives you a little sprinkling of what the color grade is if you wanted to do that. You got the big bold number, some information on there, very simple black and white design. You know, that's what I never liked about WADA. It just took away from the artwork. It took away from the box art. It took away from the cover art. I mean, it's the same.
It ends up competing with it, and that's not what you want.
Yeah,
the headliner should be the piece inside, not your fucking whatever
label
the case
and all
label or whatever. Yeah.
I mean, if you've been to my house, you've seen my collection. It looks like you're in an art museum room.
It looks beautiful. Because of that, it ended up making me spend tens of thousands of dollars on shit to get the same look. But then get ready for a shot. When you live in a garage, it doesn't matter.
Shot. Yeah. That should be 2 shots just for the patheticness of it. But
2.5, because it's a 2.5 car
garage.
Apartment.
Sorry.
Come on.
But even like CGC's new cases for video games, I mean, the people that are that, a lot of these collectors that got rich on video games, unfortunately, I bowed out for a while. I didn't, but they did. And they came over from the comic book world, They came over from the comic book world. And so they're used to that. And they like that look. I finally saw the first CGC piece up for auction on eBay recently. And it's doing pretty well. I think it's fresh. Hold on.
The CGC, what? I missed what we were. What?
They're doing video games.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. And the label looks very similar to their comic book grading. Okay. So it's still
okay.
Not,
it's weird how. So I've seen the CGC that they do sports cards too. So you see it with the comics, and it's weird because they are the industry standard. It looks normal, but then when you see that same label on anything else, I don't know. It just looks a little off to me. And I'm not saying they should change it because that's their standard, that's their brand. I 100% understand that. But it's just weird to see it with other applications.
So I like the P1 grading Player One. They've done some VHS stuff too. I don't know if you've seen their stuff. Smaller operation.
They do like you can get an 86 or a 96.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I've seen them. Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, I like what I heard they just announced recently. They're a smaller outfit. I don't know if they'll catch on. I hope they do. They do CIB stuff with the single grade, with subgrades, but with the single grade 1 to 100. I like their cases. I mean, obviously, you never know who's judging this stuff, and how they do things differently. That's a little bit of the fear with CGC for me. Is like, okay, well, we don't learn like what they prefer this way or that way. Because a lot of the game was, this would score better in VGA. This would score better in WADA. So I do like that P1. And that leads me to the question of, I can see some of the faults in the single grade that VGA used to have with their VHS and video game stuff. I do like that personally. I know it's not as good for the resale community.
Well, especially for the new people who are in whatever community, whatever it is, right? If you see 80, you're like, oh, that's not very good.
Right.
You see 85, you're like, it's okay. But really, 85 is pretty solid from VGA.
85 is, I mean, I've submitted a ton of stuff to them over the last few years and certainly before. I mean, to get anything above an 85 plus is very difficult to achieve. A 90 or above, near impossible to achieve. And most of those are 9, 8, 8 plus pluses.
And you and I know that because we've been in this for a while. But for new people, I could see where that would be a deterrent. Like, wait a minute, you want me to spend all this money on this shit, and it's just going to display at 85 out of 100? Right. I don't like that. That happened to me in the beginning. I remember when we first met, I was like, dude, 80, that sounds horrible.
Right.
It was that Jordan Bird, take a shot. That's how we met.
There we go.
And you're like, I think it'll probably be I almost gave you the I think it'll probably be an 85 plus maybe.
Yeah, I'm from Cleveland.
On a good day.
I'll talk like I'm from Cleveland, very nasal. It'll be an 85.
Are they nasally?
Oh, yeah, Parma, like girls from Parma. Oh, I'm from Parma. Oh my God! I'm gonna go to downtown again to get a bar. So listen to Parma State of Mind. It's a joke on New York State of Mind. Epic YouTube video. Parma State of Mind. Amazing, dude. The most epic white trash town in America. But I digress.
Where I'm from is pretty.
I'm telling you, bro. Parma is up there. If there was a ranking of white trash communities, Parma would be near the top.
Well, I'm up there too because we have the most bars per capita in the United States and the most trailer parks per capita in the United States.
They have at the end, there's a strip of bars, like shitty dive bars that go on for, I don't know, like a couple of miles. And the last one before you get to normal civilization suburban city is the Last Stop Inn, INN. The Last Stop Inn.
I like
it. Go.
Is there room and board up top? Nice little Airbnb.
Actually, they just redid the place. It's pretty nice, actually. It's not too bad. We went there for our
next time I'm in town. We're going there.
Yeah. So, P1 grading. I'm trying to get back on track. They do use the single grade. I like what they do. I'm giving a shout out to them. I only have a few things from them right now. I'm interested in putting some of my other stuff, the CIB stuff, with them. I just like to get a feel for how these companies are doing things. But my point was the CGC one is doing well on eBay. It's a Mario 3. So I think the market was ready for a refresh. And a lot of people are used to the split grade or the 0 to 10 scale in between. P1 is going now away from like 87, 93. They're going to do 80, 85, whatever. But I'm just relaying this to how VGA, HMA, their new endeavor, will potentially do grading. And it'd be interesting to get some comments in the section there about what people think as far as that goes. The thing that'll be interesting is, like, for certain things, like say long box CDs, perfect conversion in your mind because of the cardboard box and the hollowness, similar to video games. Cassette tapes, CDs, regular CDs, non-long box, things like that fall more into the category of like jewel case video game things, which, like, I mean, to me, it's always been like, what does a box grade mean there, right? Most of those, the box grade is like 7 or 9 something, because they either have some cracks or they don't.
Well, yeah, I mean, that puts the weight on cracks, basically, yeah.
Right, which is still kind of strange. And then if you combine that into a score, is that the best way to do it? I'm sure it'll be an interesting concept of how to put all that together and make it make sense. But then when you look at things like Laserdisc or 8-track, maybe there's usually a cardboard sleeve around those. And some of those things are more subjective in different concepts. So it'll be interesting to see and what people would prefer. I've had a bunch of different ideas of how that could look over the last year or so, and it'll be interesting to see how that ends up being. I mean, there's just something about, I like the 0 to 100 grade. I just always have. Maybe that's because where I started with it, but I've always liked that system. And for some reason, I mean, take the VGA case as it is, and let's say you took out the 85 and you made it 9.4 in that case. I just don't think it looks as cool. Well, that's just me.
And plus, it's been a standard now for a decade. So you can't just change that. And if you do that, your biggest competitor, WADA, it looks like you're just bowing to them almost.
Right.
Like, they got it right.
They did go to subgrades for the VHS, which still, I'm glad they did the overall score. I mean, does it really affect the value that much in the same way?
No, I think where it comes into play as if say you're buying one on eBay, right? They might have nice pictures, of the item, all 6 sides, whatever, but you can't really tell the flaws of the seal or the box in that listing. And that's where, if it is on the actual label of the case, then you can kind of see, oh, okay, so it might have a seal issue or a box issue or whatever, based on what individual grade it gives.
Well, and it helps you with, particularly if you're planning on crossing things and having an understanding of how things cross. I take this Gremlins example that I have. 85 plus gold. The subgrades on this are really helpful because I have a 90 seal, which, if you know VGA, dude, forget it. They're so tough on seal grades. This thing is a whatever other company, it's going to be a A++++ for the most part. Seal grade wise, or however they're going to.
We call that a mirror, the 8-ball grade.
Yes. So I'll bring out a couple of things here. This is one that I posted recently. Metallica Ride the Lightning long box CD. And this gives you the so from here, I can actually feel it from about here on up. This is all hollow from about here to here. So more than half, about 2/3 of it is hollow. And so unless you were meticulous with these,
yeah, you're going to have some kind of crushing.
You're going to have some kind of crushing or creasing or something. There's a small ding crease here. What's so cool about the long box CDs is usually the artwork was specifically made for this on the back. It's different than the LP. It's different than the cassette. Sometimes it was found on the inside of the cassette. But I just love, they're like little poster boards. I mean, little like hype posters or movie posters, or you know what I mean?
So for that Ride the Lightning long box right now, what would somebody have to give you in cash to purchase.
Well, I mean, I'm in the place where I've been buying so much music stuff over the last 2 years that I mean, I've had people reach out to me like, "Oh, I want this." I'm like, "Why would I sell anything right now?" Now that
I understand, but I'm saying if you just I understand all that. Now's not the time to dump it. Grading's about to happen. I completely get that. I'm just saying to give people an idea who might be like, maybe they don't even know what long boxes are, or they're like, oh, I remember those. If you were to put a real world value on that piece right now, ungraded, what would it be?
$500. That's probably what they go for.
That seems low, man.
I'm just 500 to 1,000. Okay, depending on. Now, I will say that I've seen some sales go quickly and move quickly. Long box stuff for the most part has moved a lot, and probably because I've been hyping it a little bit. But I've seen the difference of. I saw Nirvana Nevermind mint condition long box sell for $700 3 weeks ago, and I know another one just sold for over 2,000.
See, I was going to say the Metallica and that when you were talking about, to me, those are all in the condition you have, a minimum 2K each, as is now ungraded before grading even starts. They are just so fucking hard to find in general and hard to find minty. Unbelievable. And those are marquee titles. And the artwork is just unbelievable on those Metallica pieces. And perhaps of any form of media of those albums, the long box art pops the most and displays the best.
By far better than
it's
LP,
the hardest to find.
Yeah, and there isn't as much of an ingrained collectible culture that there are, say, in cassettes. There's a lot of longtime cassette collectors, okay, that have been snagging up this stuff. This long box shit is near impossible to find, and yeah, it doesn't. Each cassette, LP, long box, and I'm not sure exactly what the reason is why that connects. For example, of all the Metallica ones, and this might lead to my original point, the Metallica Black Album is the hardest to find and the most valuable. Okay, I have one. I paid a lot for it. I wouldn't sell it at all. Like, to me, it's a huge, because I remember buying it on long box. I remember looking at it. It was one of the first long box metal rock CDs I ever owned. It's an epic album. It's time specific, right? So like Kill 'Em All, Master of Puppets, that stuff, CDs weren't even made yet. Long box, I think, started, you have to look it up, but I thought it was around 84 or 85, something like that. Maybe. Yeah, I think around 84, because the first long box ever made, CD, the first CD ever made, they were made on long box at the time. You know what it
was? Ricky, don't lose that number.
No. Born in the USA. Bon Jovi. Bruce Springsteen. Excuse me. Other Jersey boys. Awful. But no, dude. Born in the USA is the first cassette I ever owned. My cousin bought it for me for my birthday in 1984. That's when it came out. And it's also the first CD produced in a long box form. That'll be a big deal. It will. That will be a big deal. I've seen a few of those sell recently. That will be a big deal. Don't hate on the Boss, man. Come on. Like, amazing album front to back. But my point is that some of those early Metallica albums aren't time specific to the release on long box, whereas the Black Album is, right? The majority of people probably bought that album as a long box CD when it first came out. I think
at this point, there's much more Metallica fans in love than goddamn Bruce Springsteen.
That's not my point that I'm making, bro.
I understand that. I'm making a counter or an additional point too.
That sucks. Yes. Right.
Well, I'm just saying the Metallica is going to be more marketable than the Bruce, is what I'm saying.
Bruce fans are nuts, bro. Bruce fan ticket. Can you imagine what those tickets?
Bruce fans are old. They're the ones that are going to say, "Wait a minute, you got a long box and I can't hold it in my hand.
I can't open it. What's the point? Now? I can't put it in my player."
God,
yes. No. Dude. He said does suck. He's referring to you, not to the Boss.
The boss of what? What is he the boss of? Honestly.
Well, he's changed, overrated,
mediocre music.
Dude, he's the Arlo Guthrie of our time, bro. He's the poet. He's the Bob Dylan of the 80s.
God, there's another poet, guy overrated.
Bro. He's not, annoying. You just don't get it. You don't get it. If you don't get the Boss, you just don't get it. His music brings me to tears, bro.
Oh,
tears.
God. Me too, but for a different reason.
So the point is that in long box, there's certain things that are just grail pieces. Because I think they're very, like, people bought them the most. Like, yeah, cassettes were around at that time when the Black Album came out. But I think at that time, CDs were, I think because Black Album came out in 91, 92, 91.
91, because it was along with that Blood Sugar
that
Sex
all
Magic.
those ones that came out.
The bangers.
Yeah, all the bangers came out in the same period of time. And that was all from 91. And at that time, a lot of people had started to convert over to CDs. And so a lot of people have their memories tied to CDs. While there might have been CDs in 1985 or 87 or whatever for whatever other Metallica albums, you know, Justice for All, I think, was in 88. Master of Puppets is, I think, 85. Kill 'Em All's 80. Kill 'Em All's 83. I don't know. But most of those were probably bought on cassette. Right?
Or vinyl that was a short run vinyl on Kill 'Em All. Anyway, sorry.
But mostly cassette. So that's why I think the demand for those sealed and graded will be there, because the nostalgia is stronger with that piece. So I found with long boxes, there are certain ones that I certainly remember. And then there's other ones that I'm sure other people, and those are the reason that those are. And it's really cool how some of them, like Pearl Jam 10, right? That album looks so fucking badass on a long box because it's stretched and the guys all have, you know, their arms up and whatever, and it
We're
just fits
number
perfect.
one.
Yeah,
fucking idiots. Yeah,
perfect. The way
a bunch of dudes in tight jeans facing each other, cocks dangerously close to touching, arms up in ecstasy.
Love it.
Yeah, it's so alpha with a pink background.
Dude, that CD is awesome. Some epic songs. And that cover is just, I don't know. Would you rather have that or Nirvana? Nevermind. You're going to say Nirvana, of course. See, Nirvana became all the things that
because Pearl Jam's a real fucking happy party good time.
No, I mean, their first album.
Kids shooting up the school.
Their first album was a lot more like how we used to talk about Soundgarden being. You know, it was that a little bit better blend of like 80s rock and grunge kind of put together, and then they just kind of went off track. They did dude, most of their other albums fucking suck, dude. Let's just be real. Unless you're like, it's like Dave Matthews, dude, all that shit sucks unless you're a Dave Matthews guy. Like, oh, it's so great. And you'll say it's probably like Bruce Springsteen. No. So but that's, to me, Nirvana, the album's amazing. Nevermind. In Utero's great. You know, there's some great songs, but it became that kind of like mid 90s whiny, like, oh, my parents got divorced and everything sucks and blah, blah, blah. That's why I said, dude, why are all those dudes dead, right? How many times you heard me say that? All the guys from the 90s are dead. They did the same drugs as all the guys from the 80s. And all the dudes from the 80s are still alive. You know why? Because they were having a good fucking time. It was just about banging strippers and doing coke and getting fucked up and raising hell. Same drugs the guys in the 90s did. But all those dudes are fucking dead. You know why? Because it was all negative and like, oh, I'm crying now.
Well, it's probably because it's hard to survive a gunshot to the mouth.
That doesn't help either.
That's a toughie.
But, yeah, or a sex collar around the neck or whatever else there was.
Oh, an excess guy, huh?
Well, no, there's others. And
there's
I think
more
that's
sex
how few. There's
suicides?
A couple sex scholar suicides, I think. But
Epstein?
Scott Whelan.
He wasn't a sex collar suicide.
No, Chris Cornell. Chris Cornell, I think, might have been.
Well, then Chester Bennington was too. If you're calling those sex collar crimes,
you know,
are you officially making this statement? Or
I don't know. I'm just. That's what I thought was out there. I'm not making any statements. I'm not a news reporter. I thought that's what was out there about that stuff. But I could be wrong. I mean,
you think there'd be like safety latch or something on those puppies?
Well, I mean, maybe it's like, dude, you're just in a bad place. You've done a bunch of drugs. You're like, fuck, I just want it to end. And instead of jumping out of the window, there's your sex collar from the night before.
I thought it was like
maybe not intentional.
Jerking off with the collar on.
That's just like,
Well, it takes you to new places.
If you didn't have a gun, and you're sad about whatever. But that's my point is, dude, the 80s were fucking awesome and everyone was doing the same drugs and they're all alive because it was better mentality. It's all about your mentality, bro. It's about your fucking mentality, right? Like, you could party all you want, raise fucking hell. If it's for positive reasons, you're going to survive. I'm a living example of that.
You're doing it. You're really doing it.
No, I mean, I survived it. I'm long time, mostly clean of everything. So
we'll see how long I make it. I mean, so far we're at episode 6. If we make it to like 50 and I'm still breathing, I'll be shocked.
Right.
Just shocked.
Well, I mean, people ask me all the time, why is this fucked up in your life? Or why isn't this working or whatever? And I'm like, well, to be honest with you, I really didn't plan on being here this long. nor did I think I would be. So you don't really have that kind of mentality, like a 501k.
Yeah, on the grunge
bullshit.
to hair metal scale, I'd say my mentality is
that's a good. We should start that.
Yeah,
we should start that. Remember there was a kid that went to my high school who got on Letterman or something for a while, and he would like review movies, and he would say it was the diggity dank or the schwiggity swag. Do you remember this guy?
No, God, that sounds 90s.
It was so 90s, terrible. And but yeah, we should come up with a scale. What's your scale you just came up with?
Hair metal mentality or grunge?
Grunge. Yeah. Are we
mentality. Hair metal, fun, alive, good, happy, grunge?
Are we like tight leather pants or loose plaid? What's the fucking terrible shirts they all wore? Flannels. Yeah, flannels. Oh my God. All of a sudden, right? Dude, it just fucking happened, right? Like, I remember we were in school, like, oh, GNR and Poison and, dude, fucking hair and lips and eyeshadow and fucking sexy motherfuckers, Skid Row. And then within like 3 months, it was like, you're fucking gay. And and what the and flannels. Everyone had a fucking flannel on.
Well, they came from Seattle and it was chilly, so they threw that puppy on.
Duff McKagan came from Seattle. Okay,
it wasn't as chilly then.
Yeah, I guess not. Global unwarming. So
this took a turn.
This did. I like it though. This is the real shit. This is the kind of shit we would have talked about in the 80s. So this leads me to probably the last point of today. I did have these. We're gonna do this separately. I had these nice boom boxes. I'm gonna show them off because there's 3 boom boxes now available. Retro cassette player recorder. They have a bunch of new features. They're all on Amazon.
Do you have any affiliation with these people?
No.
Okay.
Because I wanted one. Okay, because I have all my tapes. I have a huge collection of tapes.
You sound like Uncle Rico. Have you seen?
I have a huge collection.
Have I shown you my tapes?
Have I shown you my tapes?
Showing you my tapes.
I used to be able to throw this football.
No doubt in my mind, dude. Being a former actor, if you really watch that, just watch his performance in that monologue. It is unfucking believable. I know it's silly and everything, but like he hits all the beats, and you see it in his eyes. He really believes his life would have been different if Coach would have just put him in the goddamn fourth quarter.
I've seen some good monologues recently from like before.
A comedic monologue, dude, to actually nail it in a dramatic way is tough.
Yeah. So tough. A comedic monologue, very tough because stand-up is very tough. I have a few friends that are stand-up comedians. Dude, so hard. It's so hard. So hard. At least then doing a comedic monologue on TV or in a movie, you have takes, you have chances, you have whatever. Dude, stand-up where you have to play the audience and you have to feel it and you have to plow through if it doesn't work. Dude, that shit is tough.
Oh, I have eaten shit on stage many times as a stand-up. I was not a very good one. Not a very good one. I was really on that grunge scale. Yeah. And people were there for hair metal.
Right. I love that. Yeah, you are. Your comedy is very grunge, bro. Very flannel, not tight leather.
Yet my soul
that's gonna be our scale. Your soul is tight leather. Yeah, but your comedy is very flannel. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty flannel.
But I did buy all 3 of the available cassette players, modern cassette players. I'm going to open them, try them, review them all.
These are like ghetto blasters? These guys?
Dude,
or what are
sweet. There's a small one that's like a non-stereo with a single speaker. And then there's 2. They used to have these for a year, so I didn't buy them because they didn't have a built-in battery. Okay, the reason
that's so funny, dude. So I was just about to say this reminds me of growing up in a kid.
8C batteries or some shit.
I'm like, dude, do you remember though? Like in the 80s, like you would get batteries for Christmas, like a pack of batteries.
Like, giant. Yes, that'll last 4 hours at the beach with my boombox, dude. I was like, I'm not fucking buying batteries for these things. I'm not buying any of this shit until it has an internal, like we're in the fucking modern era. There should be an internal chargeable battery. USB I couldn't believe that they were, they were sending this shit out with nothing but plug it into the wall. What the fuck do I need that for a home stereo? Or put in 8C batteries. What? The fuck?
I bet C batteries are like $10 each now, for fuck's sake.
The point is that I actually had to buy some yesterday for one of Maddie's little Christmas trinkets. They're like $4 of them is $15. Yeah, Christmas trinket. She calls it Kris Kringle.
Yeah. Meanwhile, it's a
can you get some batteries for Kris Kringle?
Dildo with 60 batteries in it. Walls of the house are just shaking. Are you almost done in there?
Maddie's at it again.
She's at it.
Guess I'm not getting any tonight. Dude, so I have those to review this week, and we also need to do. If you see it up there, I have a Christmas Story on VHS. I went to the Christmas Story house last night, yesterday afternoon with Maddie and her family. A lot of people don't know. Movie was set in Indiana. On a Cleveland street. The name was Cleveland Street because it was filmed here in Cleveland. Any of the outdoor scenes involvement were filmed here. The others were filmed at a studio in Canada. The house is still here. The guy has bought all the surrounding properties and turned it into kind of like a Christmas Story museum. And now he has it up for sale. It's been on the news all over the place.
Whole, like, fucking street?
Well, he owns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would say he owns 8 to 10 lots.
Wow. So I know you haven't watched the movie yet, and I'm not giving
the new one. I haven't seen. No, I'm going to watch it tonight.
But I was wondering, I'm like, God, because they have some exterior shots of that street and everything, and you took me there, so I know what it looks like in real life. It's not great. And I'm just like, wow, how did they had to pay all these fucking neighbors these, shooting fees and shit like that. But I guess if one guy owns a bunch of them, that makes things
he owns a lot of the area there. And I mean, trust, that's not a very good neighborhood in Cleveland. No. It's like a mix of like white trash ghetto, the Puerto Rican ghettos over here. It's kind of like right on the border of the new gentrified area from the last 10 or 15 years. But that little neighborhood, I mean, it's okay. It's gotten better because of all those things coming there. But it's certainly, I mean, right down the street, they have a place that's called Steel Yard Commons, and it's nicknamed Steal Your Car Commons. Okay. So that's where it is. And now he's got it up for sale for a couple $1 million or something. But dude, the place was packed, bro. There's a gift shop that's 10 times the size of the house, and just you had to wait in line 25 minutes to fucking buy anything.
How many leg lamps are they selling the day?
Oh, dude, they're just pumping them out. It's like
another leg.
It's like the Rockettes are walking out of there every 2 seconds.
Gustavo, more legs.
But I want to hit that one. We got to do a Christmas show about that next. Maybe do a little side venture for these cassette things here. But the last thing I want to talk about, this fits perfectly with talking about grunge in the 90s, because that's really the first time that I remember. The World Cup is going on, right? Okay. Soccer stuff, futbol. And I love Alexi Lawless, dude. If you remember that guy, he was like the first American soccer star in the 90s. The gingery fuck. Yeah. He's great, dude. He's hilarious. He's so good on TV. I'm sure he has a podcast of some sort or whatever, but the dude is fucking brilliant, man. He's so funny on television. He was the first guy that I remember. And if you remember, there was kind of a group of guys in the 90s who got super into like Pearl Jam and Birkenstocks and fucking Umbro and like Samba classic shoes. And they like kind of were an offshoot of the grunge movement. They weren't even soccer players, or they were just like not good at any other sports. So they did cross country and soccer. Right.
Okay. That's going to put me on the grunge scale. That's going to put me right there.
You're a little on there, I'm guessing.
No, you see me. I can play sports.
I'm just saying, like, there was a group of guys that fit into that mentality, or guys that didn't even play soccer, but they're like, okay, I'll just get into that. I don't know how soccer and 90s grunge kind of ended up going a little bit hand in hand. And Alexi Lawless was like in the middle of
popular things at the time.
Well, wasn't he friends with Pearl Jam? I feel like he was.
Probably after the World Cup. I don't think when he was playing before the World Cup, anybody knew who he was or gave a shit about him.
No, I mean, saying, once he became somebody, I think he and Pearl Jam were kind of buddies or something.
Oh, yeah, they were even flow.
And what else I like about, now it's funny, I when I lived in LA, I lived with Venezuelan dude, Colombian guy, friend from Tahiti, all dudes super into soccer. So the World Cups that I got into watching with them in the summer were like 2006, 10, somewhere in there.
Is that like the Landon Donovan, Clint Dempsey teams? Those, okay.
Landon Donovan early and Clint Dempsey, and the later, they crossed over there. That's what I love about the soccer broadcast right now. It's some dude, and then it's Landon Donovan, Clint Dempsey, and Alexi Lawless. Literally the 3 generations of the best U.S. soccer players ever on the same panel. It'd be like LeBron, Kobe, Jordan being your commentators. Can you imagine that for like some basketball international competition?
You know who else is good from that era that was on that 94 World Cup team? Outstanding like broadcaster, and I don't want to say journalist. He's more just like a not consultant either, but who's like a guy that, and we're bringing in this guy now, like he'd be a former player expert.
Yeah, the color commentator is usually a color guy.
But he's not doing like the full broadcast. They just bring him in for like a minute.
Tony Saragusa used to do it for football.
This is Tony Miola. He was the goalie on that 94 team. Yeah, that sweet fucking that Tony Miola hair, the ponytail with the shaved sides.
Dude, that reminds me of something that did hit that I'm so surprised it never caught on. There was a team here. There was indoor soccer in the 80s and early 90s, if you remember. There were cards out. I remember the cards. There was a team called the Cleveland Crunch. It was a small field, indoor. You could play it off the walls, so the ball never went out of play. There was tons of action and tons of scoring. Dude, I never understood why that didn't catch on. That shit was badass. Like, that was fun to watch.
Like, we had the Milwaukee Wave who were like they were like the fucking 90s Bulls of that shit. They won like every year, every other year. So it was big in Milwaukee. Plus, we didn't have like, we had the Brewers and the Bucks. There weren't that many pro teams, is my point. But yeah, it was a big deal there. Anyway.
I mean, we could get into a whole conversation of why soccer. It hit me the other day. I'm like, you know why else soccer doesn't catch on in America? Because there's no fucking breaks for commercials.
Yeah, it's a business at the end of the day.
Hey,
maybe you know this. I was wondering this technical question. You know how they have like they have a replay thing in soccer now, right?
Oh yeah, the VR thing.
VAR. Yeah. So, but what I don't know is if they go to that, if they actually like, hey, we need a replay on this, do they stop the clock or do they put that into additional stoppage time?
Well, they've done a lot more stoppage time this World Cup where they just keep their, if there's a substitution or a injury or anything, they stop the time and they add it on at the end, right? So they're always like, 8 minutes left later. And dude, that VAR is wild. I mean, Americans have always hated the fact that how intricate the offsides calls are because there's not enough action in scoring in general. But now they have it down to some kind of magic science that they can see if somebody's toe is beyond this guy's toe. It's insane. And there's a bunch of goals that get called off for that. So it makes it even less scoring. But the problem with soccer is not – the problem with soccer, people like to say, oh, hockey and soccer problem is there's not enough goals scoring. Dude, hockey you could score at any moment almost. Long pass down the ice, boom, boom, and you score. Soccer's problem is there aren't enough opportunities to score throughout the game.
Well, true. And half the game, the European style of play, honestly, is keep away.
Yeah.
That's the game. Keep it away, and then towards the end of the half, make a push, or the beginning of a half, make a push and try and score and keep it away, keep it away, keep it away.
Get one and then play defense.
It is boring. It is. But the American style of play isn't like that. We're more plucky. We're just fucking attack. We're coming at you, which I like. And the Americans usually don't take those fake dives and, oh my God, I tore my ACL.
You know what the three most popular phrases in America during the World Cup have to be? Have to be. Get up, bitch. Get up, pussy. Get up, faggot. Gotta be. Yeah, for sure. Right? I would think.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of 70s and 80s people that don't have problem with those words that are probably yelling that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That word is not taboo if you're from 1970 or 80. That's what you'd be yelling at the screen.
No, it's hair metal, not grunge.
That's very hair metal. Yeah.
Very hair metal.
Yeah, very hair metal on the scale. Those are the three words that I come. Because, dude, get the fuck up, bro. What are you doing? Right?
Yeah. Like, no, I hate it. And the thing is,
and then they bring out that magic spray, and the guy's like, "Oh, I'm fine now. I want some of that magic spray to fix all my video game fucking things.
Fix my back. Oh yeah, video games too. No, but like half the time they don't even get to the spray, and he's like, the worst pain ever. Yeah. And then the ref either makes a call or it's like, no, get up. And then he's popped up and he's at full fucking speed.
There was a dude the other day that was like screaming bloody murder and holding his Achilles. And I was like, oh, damn, like, fuck, dude, that's really bad.
Like, have you seen someone rip their Achilles in person?
Yeah, my cousin did it with me.
I've seen it 2 or 3 times, and it's fucking awful.
I was like, oh, dude, this dude's fucked. Like, this is terrible, right?
Yeah.
And then, like, as soon as they had figured out if there's a penalty or not, he just got up and walked off. I was like, you motherfucker got me too. They just get you, don't they? They're like, dude, I'm like, fuck you, bro. You got me.
They should do a section this year at the Oscars, like Best Actor, and it's just a whole bunch of fucking soccer
players. Yeah. And they all know it too. That's the funny part. Like, and they even play along. Like, oh, sorry, bro. Come on, get up. It's like, okay, like it's bizarre. It's
too much milking of the clock and extra time if you're away. And I don't even mean keep away. That I respect because that still requires movement and precise passing and all that stuff. I'm talking about like the fucking, oh, I'm hurt. Or if there's a substitution, they walk so fucking slow to the sideline to eat more of that stoppage time clock. It's un-American.
Dude. So it's funny for me. I never really rooted for the American team. I mean, kind of, but you're just kind of like, it's almost like all these people that get so gung-ho, like, whoa, this is our year. And you're like, okay, dude, yeah, sure, I got it.
Especially it's our year to make progress. It's never a year to win.
They've been making progress for 30 years since I've been watching it. But when I was really into watching it with my friends in LA, like, it's just funny to list all these people so fired. I was like, dude, come on, it ain't happening. Did they make much progress this year? Maybe a little bit. I mean, obviously, this will be at home in 4 years, so maybe that'll make a difference. But for me, my family's European. I have Slovenian family and German family that are in.
You got one more in there. One more shot.
One more shot. So I always rooted for Slovenia or Croatia or Germany or whatever. And obviously, there's more to root for. Croatia won today. Slovenia was in it a few years ago. But you got to have somebody else to root for besides the U.S. in the World Cup. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Growing up, I mean, yeah, because like the first big exposure, well, probably to all of us, regardless of age, was that 94 World Cup in America. Like that was a big deal. They really pumped that and promoted it. But anyway, so yeah, I liked USA, but I'm like, well, they're not going to fuck it. There's no chance in hell. Even if he has a ponytail, that's badass. So I went with Italy. That was my team.
That the 2006 Italy team, I think, that won it, or did they win it? I think they beat France and Zidane. Zidane was so good, if you remember Zidane. That 2006 Italy team was amazing. It had Francesco Totti, one of the sexiest guys ever, and like Cannavaro, I remember, was another guy. And I remember looking through the list, but my favorite players of all time are probably from the German squad. I loved Klose, who was a striker scorer. He was a Polish guy, actually, that played for Germany. I think his dad or mom or somebody was from there. And then Sebastian Schweinsteiger. I love when they sound very much like their country, like Neymar and Ronaldo and all those guys that just really fit in with it. But
it's a team that I don't like root for, but every World Cup I've ever seen, I love how they play, is fucking Mexico. Those motherfuckers, they just go at it, man.
I haven't followed them that much. I know they always seem to do fairly well. There was a crazy game. The Uruguay game and how that ended. I always liked Suarez. There's been some guys I didn't, that's the thing. If we go back to it, I wasn't really I had some friends that watched some World Cup stuff in the 90s. I mean, the only names I even remember from the 80s being a kid were like Maradona, right? Like from Argentina. Pelé, everybody knows Pele or whatever.
Are you going to claim he's Slovenian too? I'm waiting for it.
No. But Luka Doncic is bitch. Yeah.
So the dude I remember from the night, Roberto Baggio, Italy. It came down to PKs for the World Cup against Brazil, and it came down to him. He makes it, they win. He misses.
Croatia beat Japan.
And what did he fucking do? Wow, Japan's a plucky team. But what did he do? He fucking bombed it over the goddamn net.
You notice they do that a lot, but today I think they finally just get it on goal somewhere and hope. Dude, the Croatian keeper made 3 saves on penalty kills today in the penalty kill shootout. Wild.
Penalty kicks.
Penalty kicks.
That was
like a
so
true
grunge.
American soccer fan. Like soccer to me is like the Olympics, right? Like every 4 years, I watch it. I know everything about it. I can tell you what happened 4 years ago. And these guys, dude, in between, it's like women's gymnastics. Dude, I'm a fucking expert when the Olympics come around, right? Like, I'm a fucking women's gymnastics expert. 4 years in 4 years in between, do you think I ever watched any women's gymnastics? Ever in those 4 years? Zero, bro. Zero. There's like 20 sports like that from the Olympics. Soccer's like that for me. I just can't. And yeah, you put all those guys on the same team. I'm sure they're so good in Europe somewhere, but dude, I'm just not, I can't, I think it's the country versus country thing that does it for me and all those things, Olympics and whatnot. But I don't know.
I agree. And it gives you, pride for your country.
Hey, someone's at the door. Carry that on. Come up with something.
Well, let's just fucking wrap. We're at an hour and we're there.
Thanks for joining us. Good stuff. See you soon for Christmas episode. And maybe join in for the cassette tapes. You guys have a good one. Peace.
See ya.